Hello to everyone who's here already. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes for people to join, and then we're going to start with the first discovery session of 2024. Just going to give it a couple more minutes. Whilst we're waiting, if anyone's got any questions, you'll see there is the chat bot on the right-hand side of the screen. So feel free to pop any questions in there as they come up. Okay, just going to give it another minute or two. Welcome to those of you that have just joined. Okay, how many have we got now? Right, I'll just give it another minute and then we shall start. Okay, right, I'm going to make a start. So a very warm welcome to all our lovely customers who have joined us today to learn a little bit more about our risk assessment module. So whether you've already got it as part of your solution or whether you're interested in adding it on. I'm going to talk you through a demo that's going to cover the features of the module, as well as some exciting new additions. Before that, we're going to have Kirstie Jones, our Head of Client Services, and Vijay Venkatesh, our Audit Team Leader, and they're going to cover what a risk assessment is, why it's so crucial to have them in place, and the best practices from a safety consultant perspective. We will have time for a little Q&A at the end, just in case we haven't covered what it is you're after. Do feel free to ask any questions as we go along in the chat box just on the side of the screen. We'll answer any of your queries as best we can, but I'm now going to hand over to Kirstie and Vijay, who will kick us off. You might just see there is a poll on the right-hand side. If you could answer that poll, I'd be hugely grateful. I'll hand it over to you, Kirstie.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amber, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining. So I just want to start with looking at why a risk assessment is so important. Risk assessments are a big part of your health and safety management system. They form the framework for this and play a key role in identifying hazards, analysing the level of risk they pose, and mitigating the harm that hazards can cause in the workplace. They therefore help to prevent accidents and incidents from occurring by highlighting specific hazards from tasks and equipment and the potential risks or threats that work activities can cause. Risk assessments help to set the correct level of control, or what we call safe systems of work, to address the associated hazards. They provide a systematic approach to safety management and enable employers to build a better understanding of safety in the workplace overall. And significant findings from your risk assessment should be communicated to your teams, as they help to generate appropriate awareness and ensure consistency with implementation of safe systems of work. So moving on to whether risk assessment is a legal requirement, the simple answer is yes. By law, all employers have a legal obligation to protect employees and other people affected by their work. Examples of this are visitors and contractors to your location, or even members of the public. The general requirement to risk assess falls under the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, but there's a whole host of other regulations that require you to risk assess assess the risk presented to employees by the tasks that they carry out. So other examples include manual handling, COSH, so chemical safety, and fire safety as well. There are also certain regulations that require you to risk assess individuals within the workplace who may be more vulnerable, either over a set time period or indefinitely as they work in your location. This could be young people, expectant mothers, or people that are affected by the type of work that they do, such as lone workers. So anyone that is classed as being potentially more vulnerable in the workplace would need a individual or person specific risk assessment. So when we look at risk assessments, we tend to classify them into general, which cover tasks and equipment, legal, which cover things like fire safety with your legal obligations in terms of a specific reference to regulation, and then individual or person specific. So there's three key types of risk assessment that you need to have an understanding of. So who is responsible for risk assessment? Well, employers are responsible for carrying out risk assessment, but in larger companies, these responsibilities may be delegated to a local level manager or supervisor known as a responsible person. So if a company employs more than 5 members of staff, then the significant findings of the risk assessments must be documented. And these form part of your due diligence. So should something go wrong, they will be used as evidence to demonstrate that all reasonably practicable steps have been taken to prevent a reoccurrence. So if an employer does delegate the responsibilities of risk assessment, they need to be comfortable and confident that the responsible persons are able to fulfill those duties and ensure that risk assessments are completed accurately and effectively. So employees should also play a part here as well. Although ultimately the key responsibility sits with the employer and the delegated responsible person, employees should proactively report any changes, any new hazards, any issues or concerns they may have to their employer, in order to ensure the risk assessment remains suitable and sufficient. So in essence, everybody's got a part to play with regards to risk assessment. That leads me on nicely to look at who should perform a risk assessment. Now, they should really be undertaken by those responsible and competent persons. So anybody that is delegated as a responsible person should also be competent to be able to do the task correctly. So this is someone with the relevant knowledge, experience, local expertise, and the skills to effectively assess the work activity, equipment, or process. So it's someone with that close understanding to be able to look at the activity from start to finish and assess what could go wrong at any particular point in time. We can only assess the foreseeable hazards, and there is no right or wrong answer when it comes to risk assessment. So as long as you're able to justify your decisions within the assessment, then that's absolutely fine. So whilst we talk about competent persons, we're very much looking for someone who has got that good understanding and experience and skills to be able to make those key decisions when it comes to a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. And that is really particularly important when it comes to assessing the level of risk, as this impacts on the level of control required. So looking at best practice hints and tips, really, for this part, I'm going to go through the 5 steps to risk assessment. So this is the HSE's recognised method of assessment. The first part is to identify the hazards. This is anything that's got the potential to cause harm. It might be a trailing cable, it might be a wet floor, it might be a damaged walk-in chiller door handle, for example. You always need to walk through your location or closely assess the item of equipment that you're assessing for this part of the assessment. Risk assessments are intended to be practical as well as theoretical and involve your team. So always speak to your team when you're carrying out a risk assessment. It's really important because they carry out the day-to-day work and will be able to assist you in identifying those key hazard areas. The second part of the 5 steps to risk assessment is to look at assessing the risk. This can be gauged by looking at the likelihood of the occurrence and the severity of the harm presented. So with this, you always need to think worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that could happen if something was to go wrong? If one of your control measures did break down, or there was another incident or scenario that caused an accident, always think what is the worst case likelihood and severity of that scenario. It's always best practice to apply a numerical risk matrix here to help evaluate the level of risk presented in terms of helping you to equate to a low, medium or high level of risk. So you can quantify the level of risk as well. And then we move on to identifying the controls. Well, these need to be applied to reduce the risk to a safe level. And often when looking at the hierarchy of control, we suggest to start by eliminating the hazard altogether. If this can't be done, then what controls are needed to bring the risk down to a safe level? And when we think about safe level, we're looking at a low or medium risk level. We should never leave a risk assessment outcome as a high risk, because this isn't acceptable to the team. It could compromise safety. So the term reasonably practicable can be considered when it comes to controls, and cost effectiveness of controls can also be applied. So there's a lot to think about with identifying suitable and sufficient control measures in terms of how effective they will be at controlling the hazard, and also think about wider implications of business operations with regards to cost effectiveness. And coming on to a conclusion then, the last 2 stages of a risk assessment are to record the findings and to review. So recording the findings, really my hints and tips when it comes to this is just to keep them simple. There are some really good risk assessments templates that we have available on our system. They are nice and well formatted and easy to communicate to your team. So keep them simple and keep them easy to be able to communicate those key findings to your teams. And then finally, review. This is the last step in the 5 steps to risk assessment, and this will ensure the risk assessment remains suitable and sufficient. Keywords when it comes to legal compliance of risk assessment. If something was to go wrong, the enforcement officers would be looking to ensure that your risk assessments are suitable and sufficient to control the hazards that have been presented in the scenario. So risk assessments do form an ongoing part of your safety management system and should remain active and fit for purpose to ensure that a good level of health and safety is maintained. Thank you very much for your time, and I will now hand over to Amber to go through the demo.
Thank you so much, Kirstie. That was brilliant. So moving on, we're now going to give you a demonstration of the risk assessment module on the platform. So if you just bear with me one moment, I'm just going to share my screen with you. All right. Okay, hopefully everyone should be able to see that. So this is our dashboard. So under the risk assessment module, the first thing we're going to do is click new risk assessment. You'll then see, once that loads, that we've got all of our risk assessments here. So this isn't all of them, but this is just to give you an example for demonstration purposes of the kinds of risk assessments that we can have on the platform. So you've got your general risk assessments. We've got the ones that Kirstie was referring to, so your person-specific risk assessments. We've got the chemical risk assessments, right to work and front of house. So for demonstration purposes, this isn't everything, but it's just to give you an idea of what can be held on the platform. So just to start with, I'm going to go into violence against staff. When this loads up, you'll be able to see that it does have the NA applicable option. So basically this means, for example, if you've got more than one site and for a particular reason that risk assessment is not applicable to that site, you can get your site team to just mark this as non-applicable, and therefore it won't show as outstanding for that site. And later on, I'll be able to show you how that then reports back for management. so you can see the evidence of that. So I'm just going to move forward with this form. Again, if you do have any questions while we go through this, please just put them in the chat bar and someone will be able to answer them for you just while I'm doing the demonstration. Okay, so you'll be able to see this is what the form's looking like. It's important to note that all our forms can be tailored. So for example, where you've got the wording already entered here, so the area where the violence occurred, you've got reception, switchboard, porters or concierge, wherever that could happen. This can be changed, so it doesn't necessarily have to say this, or it can be blank. So we can tailor that to suit your business needs. And we can also tailor what the questions look like as well and how they're answered, if it's a text box, if it's a drop down, all that kind of stuff. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to leave that in there. So the activity is violence against staff. The person that's doing the assessment is myself. So we shall put today's date in. And then moving down, you'll be able to see hazards. So the hazards in this instance is assault, threatening behaviour, verbal abuse. There could be physical abuse that we could add on here. And again, it doesn't have to say this wording. This can be blank, or we can change it to suit your business needs. So the hazard is obviously threatening behaviour, assault, verbal abuse. So who might be harmed? It could be front of house staff. It could be other as well. So we'll also add customers and contractors, because it could impact any contractors visiting the site as well. We can also tailor this as well. So where you've got the selection boxes here, we can add different options for you. So if I just scroll down on here, you'll be able to see that the risk assessment includes this risk assessment table. So this basically goes through the probability and severity in terms of low, medium, high. So in this instance, the probability and severity is high because we've got no risk assessments in place. If someone comes in and they're in a bad mood, they can start kicking off. We don't have those risk assessment controls in place. So if we scroll down here, at the moment, we're going to put the severity as high. The probability will also be high. And the risk rating will be high because we haven't got those controls in yet. So as we move further on with the form, we're going to look at the safe system of work and controls in place. So what are we going to put in to prevent these things happening, or at least deter it? So at the moment, we've got staff receive violence at work training, panic buttons or direct access to telephones. You've got your lone workers to carry radios or mobile phones, so you can have regular contact with your walkie-talkies. And cash carrying procedures in place, to protect staff if they are dealing with money, and CCT coverage of key areas. So again, we can add to this list. This can go on and on, or this can be blank, and we can tailor it to suit your business. So I'm going to leave that as is because that's relevant to what we're doing today. So if I just scroll down, you can add in any further actions required. So if there's any additional controls that you want to put in place, it could be, follow up with staff on behaviours or anything like that at all. You can add that into this box here. So as we've now got our controls listed, we're going to go back to the final risk assessment with the controls in place. And again, look at the probability and severity. So in this instance, we've now got the controls in. So we're going to put the severity as low, the probability is low, and then in turn, the risk rating will be low. So hopefully I've not gone through that too quickly, but do say if I have. So just to quickly breeze through that again, you can see this isn't a very long form, but this can be tailored to suit your business. So it doesn't have to have all these exact questions. We can add in whatever you need. So once we get to the bottom of the form, we've completed everything. We're just going to click submit. And then once you click submit, you'll see that the risk assessment has been given a reference number. This is now saved in the system. So you'll see here there's a timeline history. So you can see a date and timestamp of when the form was created and then when the form was submitted, which is fantastic for evidence. If you ever need to pull any information, if there's a case that comes up, you've got all the evidence here of the date and time that something's been completed. You can see the history, and you can also recreate this risk assessment, or you can review it at any time. So if we just scroll down, you can see how that looks, all the options that we've selected, the information that we've inputted, and how that looks. So that one is your violence against staff in the workplace. I'm now going to go through another one with you, which covers more of your COSH side of things. Again, if there's any questions on this as we go through, please just pop it in the chat box. So for this one, just going to scroll down to chemical. We'll do this one. Again, you can see it pops up with the NA option, so you can mark this as not applicable if it's not relevant to a site. They might not have those facilities on site. Okay, so we've now created the risk assessment for the multi-surface floor cleaner. Again, you'll see that some of this text is already pre-entered. That's just for the purpose of the demonstration. You don't have to have that text there. It can be blank, or we can change that. So for this one, we've got multi-surface and floor cleaner. It's important to note with this risk assessment that if you're covering different chemicals, you could actually have multiple tabs on the side here. So as I go through, it might make more sense. But you could have this tab for one chemical, tab 2 for another chemical, tab 3 for another chemical, and you can upload the data sheet for each page. So you don't have to have everything on separate forms as such. It can be within the same risk assessment, just in different sections. Or you could have a risk assessment per chemical, entirely up to you and how your business would prefer that to be set up. So moving on, the product use. So this is washing and cleaning products. The assessor, I'm going to put myself in again, and today's date. So then the hazards could be it's harmful if swallowed. You know, if you've left some bleach on the kitchen side and someone thinks, oh, that looks like a nice cocktail or some juice, and they try and neck that, then they're going to cause themselves some damage. So it's important to make sure that we're aware of the hazards and we put the right controls in place. So it could also cause serious eye damage, eye irritation, you know, definitely an upset stomach. Again, I know I sound like I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs at this point, but this can also be tailored here as well. So we can change this wording or leave it blank. So who might be harmed? Well, it could be an employee, customer, contractor. Again, you can add in any other as well. So if you wanted to add in anything else, you could note that here. For the purpose of the demo, I've got this in as not applicable. So your initial risk assessment. At the moment, the probability and severity, I'm going to say, is pretty high because people don't know what the risks are around this. They've not seen the risk assessment yet. So they could be drinking bleach for the fun of it. So we'll put this as high. So what are we going to put in place? What controls and how are we going to manage this? So we need staff to be aware that you do not ingest that liquid. When you handle, you use the correct PPE, that the chemical is stored in the correct area, so in a cool and dry place. You don't eat, drink or smoke when using the product for contamination purposes. You don't handle until all safety precautions have been read and understood. You definitely need to avoid contact with eyes and also keep out of reach of children. So we could add to this list if we wanted, but at the moment that covers everything we need. So that's our controls. We're not going to add any further actions because I think that covers everything for now. So moving on, we've got our final risk assessment. So now we've put the controls in place, we're going to relook at this. So the probability and severity. Well, the staff will now know the risks involved. So we're going to put the severity as low, the probability as low, and the risk rating as low. So you'll see this is also a red, amber, green system as well, which is great. So if we click next, this is quite a really good part of this form. So you can upload your data sheets and you can upload as many as you want to. And this is what I was just explaining earlier. So if you had a chemical on tab 1, you can upload a data sheet for that chemical on tab 1. If you had another chemical on tab 2, again, you could upload a data sheet for that chemical. For the purpose of the demo, we're just going to do the one. So I'm just going to upload a data sheet into this. And this is brilliant for evidence purposes because it means if you ever need to refer back, you've got everything in one place, your data sheet's there, it's linked to the risk assessment, so you haven't got to go trawling through paperwork or anything like that. So if I just scroll down the data sheet, we're going to put that this is valid to December, do 31st of December, and then submit. And there we have, that's our completed risk assessment. So again, you've got a reference number here. That's just handy to know if you're, need any support with a form or you're referring back, you've got your reference number. You'll be able to see again, you've got your timeline history on the side. So you can see date and time created and the date and time submitted and who has done that. So you can see all information that's been inputted into the form. And then you've got your data sheet at the bottom. So you can actually click this PDF, it's a link, and it will load up the form for you. So fantastic when you need everything in one place. That is your cost risk assessment. So I'm now going to move on. If you've got any questions, again, please do feel free to put them in the chat box. So we're now going to just look at briefly person specific, and then I'm going to go on to our new feature on the platform. So if I just go back to the new risk assessment tab, you'll be able to see here under personal, we've got a couple here already. So what you would do when you click on the risk assessment, you'll see this has risk name. So this is where you would then put in your staff member's name, and that risk assessment will then be linked to that staff member. I'm just going to show you what that looks like once you complete one, because these ones are a little bit longer on here for the demo. So here's one that I made earlier. If I click view. So this one, you'll be able to see that this is what the PPE one looks like if we were to go through and complete. So you've got your staff member's name, the date the form has been completed. You'd then add in the task, so what it is that they're completing, and any PPE that's required. This is all free text, so you can add in as much as you like. There's different tasks here that can be relevant to it, so you can include it all in the one risk assessment if you wanted. Any additional controls, so following the guidelines of standard operating procedures, make sure they always wear their PPE as guided. And then you'll see you've got your manager's signature here and your employee's signature here. And that's been submitted, and then that's what this looks like. So that's date and time stamped again. So again, you've got all the evidence that you need to fall back on should you need it. So then that's going to lead me on to our new feature on the platform, which is Employee Risk Matrix. So that's the little option here. If I click My Employees, and then what we're going to do first, I'm going to show you. So we're going to add an employee. And the important thing to note here is that the employee doesn't have to have access to the system in order to sign off the risk assessment. So I'm just going to put Kirstie in for the demo and submit. And you'll then see that Kirstie has now appeared on this list. So all we need to do is mark Kirstie as active, and then that little tick goes to green. And there's a couple of ways of being able to assign risk assessments to staff. So one option is to go on More, Edit, and Assign. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you a different way. So just here, you can see Assign Risk. I'm going to click onto that one. And this is great because this feature means that if you wanted to, you can select all employees at the same time. And then you can select whichever risk assessment you want them to be linked to. So you can select all, or you can select multiple different options. So for the purpose of the demo, let's find Kirstie. In fact, we'll select all, and then we're going to assign violence against staff. We'll do that one. And then click Save. And that's been created. So if we go back to My Employees, Kirstie should now have a risk assessment linked to her. Yeah, so you'll be able to see, I've done it for everybody, but you'll be able to see clearly for Kirstie that she had none to start with, and she's now got one risk assessment associated. However, it's not yet been completed. So all you would need to do is your management or whoever would be in charge of this can take the tablet or have the employee sat at the computer screen. You'd click into more and details. And then all you would need to do is click sign off. When you click sign off, it will take you to the risk assessment that we've created. You'll see all the information is inputted on here. So all of the stuff that we've put in, all here. And then as we scroll down, it has employee sign off. So this is where you can hand the tablet to your member of staff, or if you're sat with them at a computer or on a mobile device, they'll be able to go into here, add their name, tick the box, they confirm that they've read the contents of the risk assessment, they understand the hazards associated with that activity and the subsequent controls that need to be implemented to be able to carry out the activity in a safe manner. And then the best part here is you've got your employee signature. So we'll do this. You click sign off. And there you have it. So that risk assessment has now been completed by that employee. They've seen it. They've ticked that they've read the risk assessment. They understand it. And you've now got evidence of that. So if I click view, if I scroll down, just on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see risk matrix history. So that shows you that this member of staff at this date and time has seen the risk assessment and they've signed that they understand it. So if you've got any questions on this section, please do say in the chat box, because this is a new section. It's a fantastic new feature on the platform, and I think it will be a great benefit. So that is our risk assessments and our new feature. So I'll just get back to the dashboard. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen. So I'm now going to hand over to Kirstie and Vijay, because they're now going to go through some common questions that we have in terms of risk assessments and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to hand over to Vijay. I'll let you cover some of the common questions. And if you've got any other questions, please, again, do pop them in the chat box.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Kirstie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first ever customer discovery session. We have populated some questions which are frequently asked to us, as you can see on the presentation in front of you. So I'll address these 4 questions first, and then me and Kirstie will take in more questions as well, and ensure that we respond to everyone who's got a question. Thank you. The first question is, when should you review a risk assessment? Okay, whenever there are significant changes to the workplace or work process design, and when new machinery or any substance or any process is introduced, that is where we should review the risk assessment. How often do you need to conduct a risk assessment? It is always a best practice to review and conduct it annually. However, it is vital and doubly important to review it if there is an injury or an incident as a result of exposure. So, which means that it's great practice to review it every year, and that's the standard guideline of the industry. However, it is important that we review it post any accident or incident. The third question was, how long must risk assessment records be kept? There is no legal requirement, as in there's no legal minimum time that a risk assessment, how long must a risk assessment be kept for? The Health and Safety Executive, HSE, recommends that you keep them as long as they remain relevant to your business. As a general rule, we always advise that 5 years, and the HSE advises as well, that 5 years should be most suitable for different businesses. And finally, is there a specific number of risk assessments that need to be done? Unfortunately, there's no set magic number of risk assessments that need to be done. It completely depends on every workplace and the hazards identified in those workplaces. This goes in line with what Kirstie Jones was previously saying about the importance of risk assessment and how it must be conducted and stuff like that, and Amber's demo on risk assessment and so on. It is not expected to eliminate all the risks, but it is expected that every management must do everything reasonably practicable to protect people from harm. And that's the main purpose of doing the risk assessment, isn't it? One of the very common risk examples we find at workplace is slip, trips, and falls. So thinking of slip, trips, and falls, what are the most, which is an obvious risk in a workplace? What are the controls we are kind of looking at? We're looking at cleaning, having appropriate signages, and mopping and sweeping of debris, removing any obvious obstacles, and kind of keeping the walkways free of any clutter. So these are the controls you would apply to the risks which have been identified at your workplace. And that's how we would work on completing a risk assessment. So these are the most common questions which we have been asked before. And I've tried to answer these in this session. We are now open to take more questions if any of you might have. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Vijay. That's brilliant. So massive thank you to everyone for attending our customer discovery session today, our first one of 2024 and our first one of many. So it's aimed at helping you to get the most out of your safety solution with us. There's a lot to the platform, so these sessions are going to be really beneficial. In February, we're going to talk through our new extended warranty options and our new multilingual training courses, and we'll share some information on those in the next couple of weeks. So to go with today's risk assessment session, we have got a few free resources to support you further. This includes our new blog, When Should a Risk Assessment Be Reviewed?, a guide to timely evaluation and safeguarding, a solution sheet on the main features of our module, and a slips, trips and falls risk assessment template for you to use. So you can download all of these in the chatbot now. It should now be appearing for you. If you've not already got the risk assessment module and you'd be interested in implementing it for your business and discussing further, please can you vote yes in the chat box poll, and we'll get your account manager or a member of the team to support you with this. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop it in the chat box now. Alternatively, you can email the team, so that'll be at hello@navitassafety.com, and we will get back to you. So a massive thank you to everyone joining us today and for your time. I know everyone's very busy, but we really appreciate you being here, and I do really hope that this was beneficial for you all. So thank you again. I'm just going to leave a couple more minutes for people to ask any questions they've got, and then we shall close off. If you think of any questions a bit later on in the day, again, you can reach out to the team. It's no issue at all, and we'll pick it up for you. I know we've covered a lot of information today, so if there is anything, don't hesitate to reach out. But a massive thank you again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, have a lovely afternoon, everybody. Thank you again, and we shall see you very soon. Take care.